My parents missed the birth of their first grandchild because they didn't want to miss their neighbor's retirement dinner. When I tell people this story, they think I'm exaggerating. I wish I was. What happened next taught me the most painful lesson about family loyalty I never wanted to learn. Please subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have your parents ever shocked you with their priorities? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was a Thursday evening in late September, and the air in Millbrook carried that crisp hint of autumn that made everything feel like new beginnings. I was 38 weeks and 6 days pregnant, waddling around our small apartment on Elm Street like a penguin who'd lost her way. My husband David was in the kitchen, assembling what he optimistically called a nursery snack station, basically a card table loaded with granola bars, crackers, and enough bottled water to survive a small apocalypse. "Mia, you need to sit down," he called out for the 100th time that week. The doctor said to rest. I laughed, or tried to, but it came out more like a wheeze. "David, I've been resting for 3 weeks. If I rest anymore, I'll forget how to walk." Our apartment was tiny. A one-bedroom on the second floor of a converted Victorian house that creaked every time someone walked upstairs. We'd transformed the corner of our bedroom into what we generously called the nursery. A white crib from David's sister, a changing table from a garage sale, and a rocking chair that my mother-in-law, Patricia, had driven down from Burlington, specifically for us. That's the thing about David's family. They showed up. When we announced the pregnancy at Easter dinner, Patricia cried actual tears of joy and immediately started knitting blankets. His father, Robert, had already begun, building a toy chest in his garage workshop. His sister Emma had been texting me weekly with pregnancy tips and funny memes to keep my spirits up during the harder days. My own family's reaction had been different. When I called my parents, Claire and Marcus Hensley, to share the news, there was a pause. Not the good kind of pause, the processing kind. The kind where you realize you've interrupted something more important. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," my mother had finally said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was multitasking. "Your father and I are just heading out to the Riverside Country Club for dinner with the Weatherbys. You know how they are about punctuality. Can we call you back tomorrow to talk details?" The Weatherbys. My parents' closest friends and neighbors in their upscale Brookstone development. Richard Weatherby owned 3 car dealerships across the county, and his wife Helen organized charity galas that got written up in the local society pages. They lived in a sprawling colonial with a circular driveway and landscape lighting that could be seen from space. My parents had moved to Brookstone 5 years ago, when Dad's accounting firm finally became profitable enough for them to afford what Mom called the lifestyle we always deserved. The house was beautiful, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen that belonged in a magazine, and a backyard perfect for the dinner parties they'd started hosting regularly. But something had shifted when they moved there. Maybe it was the neighborhood, maybe it was their new friends, or maybe it was just that they finally felt like they'd made it and wanted to protect that status. Whatever it was, David and I definitely didn't fit the image they were cultivating. We lived in what Mom diplomatically called a transitional neighborhood. David worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing company, and I taught 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary. We drove a 7-year-old Honda and shopped at Target instead of the boutiques that lined Brookstone's main street. We weren't poor, but we weren't Brookstone material either. My younger sister, Sophia, had always been different. At 24, she was 3 years younger than me, but somehow light years ahead in what my parents considered life achievements. She'd landed a marketing job at a tech startup in the city, lived in a trendy loft apartment, and dated guys who wore expensive watches and talked about disrupting industries. When Sophia visited, she brought wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget and stories about networking events and rooftop parties. Mom and Dad hung on her every word. Sophia's company is expanding internationally, Mom would announce, at family dinners, as if Sophia had personally conquered Europe. She's being considered for the London office. Meanwhile, when I mentioned getting tenure at the elementary school, the response was usually something like, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear about Sophia's promotion?" It wasn't that my parents were cruel. They weren't. They loved me in their way. But love and priority aren't always the same thing, and I'd learned over the years that I occupied a comfortable but distant second place in their attention. Still, pregnancy felt different. This was their first grandchild, their legacy. Surely, this would be the thing that finally made me feel like a priority in their lives. The nursery corner of our bedroom was modest, but filled with love. David had painted the walls a soft yellow since we'd decided to be surprised about the gender. We'd hung a mobile that played Brahms' Lullaby, and I'd spent hours arranging tiny clothes in the dresser drawers, marveling at how something so small could completely rearrange your entire world. As I sat in the rocking chair that evening, feeling the baby's movements slow into what I'd learned were pre-labor patterns, I imagined the phone calls I'd make when the time came. I pictured my parents rushing to the hospital, Mom holding my hand the way she used to when I had nightmares as a child, Dad pacing in the waiting room like expectant fathers do in old movies. I imagined family photos, 3 generations together, my parents holding their grandchild for the first time, tears in their eyes, finally understanding that this moment was bigger than dinner parties and country club memberships and keeping up with the Weatherbees. David squeezed my shoulder. "What are you thinking about? Just tomorrow, maybe, or the next day. How everything's about to change." He kissed the top of my head. Good change. The best change. Outside our window, Millbrook was settling into its evening rhythm. Porch lights flickering on, the sound of children being called in for dinner, the distant hum of traffic from the main road. It was ordinary and peaceful, and exactly the kind of place I wanted to raise a child. I had no idea that in less than 12 hours, I'd learn just how little ordinary moments matter when they compete with social obligations. I had no idea that the phone call I'd been dreaming about making would become the conversation that changed everything between my parents and me forever. But that night, sitting in our tiny apartment with David's hand on my shoulder and our future rearranging itself inside me, I still believed in the power of family. I still believed that some moments were sacred enough to transcend everything else. I was about to discover how wrong I was. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At 3:47 a.m. on Friday morning, I woke up to what felt like someone wrapping a steel band around my midsection and slowly tightening it. The pain started low in my back, radiating forward like a wave, building to a crescendo. That made me grip the edge of our nightstand until my knuckles went white. "David?" I whispered, then louder when the contraction peaked. "David!" He jolted awake instantly, that new father alertness that had kicked in weeks ago. "Is it time? Are you okay? Should I get the bag?" I breathed through the pain, counting the way our birthing class instructor had taught us. I think this might be it. For the past 3 weeks, I'd been having what Dr. Rodriguez called practice contractions, Braxton Hicks that would build up, make me hold my breath, then fade away like a false alarm. But this was different. This had a purpose, a rhythm, an unstoppable momentum that felt like my body had finally decided it was done waiting. David was already up, pulling, on jeans and a t-shirt with shaking hands. Okay. The bag is by the door. I charged both our phones. The car has gas. Hospital is 12 minutes away, but at this hour, maybe 8. Should I call Dr. Rodriguez? Should we call anyone? Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and I had to lean against the dresser. Not yet. Let's see if they keep coming. But even as I said it, I knew. After 39 weeks of carrying this baby, after months of false alarms and midnight kicks and wondering when it would happen, my body was telling me in no uncertain terms, today was the day. We timed the contractions for the next hour. They came every 7 minutes, then every 6, then every 5. Each one stronger than the last, each one more insistent. By 5 a.m., I was gripping David's hand through each wave, breathing in short bursts, unable to talk until they passed. "We need to go," David said, checking his watch. "They're getting close together." I nodded, suddenly nervous in a way I hadn't expected. All the preparation, all the reading, all the classes, and now that it was actually happening, I felt completely unprepared, but also excited. After all these months of waiting, I was finally going to meet my baby. David loaded the hospital bag into our Honda, while I called Dr. Rodriguez's answering service. The on-call nurse told me it sounded like early labor and to come in for monitoring. "This is really happening," I said to David as we pulled out of our driveway. The streets of Millbrook were empty except for a few early commuters and a jogger with reflective gear. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but somehow, the world felt completely different. "You're going to be amazing," David said, reaching over to squeeze my hand between contractions. "I can't believe we're going to meet our baby today." The drive to Millbrook General took exactly 9 minutes. David dropped me off at the maternity entrance while he parked the car, and a nurse named Janet wheeled me up to the labor and delivery floor. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and hope, that particular combination of sterile cleanliness and life-changing moments. They put me in room 237, a surprisingly peaceful space with soft lighting and a window that looked out over the hospital's garden. Dr. Rodriguez arrived within an hour, confirmed that I was in active labor, and told us we were looking at probably 8 to 12 more hours. "First babies like to take their time," she said with a smile. "Get comfortable. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint." By 8 a.m., the contractions were coming every 3 minutes and requiring all of my concentration. David was perfect, rubbing my back, helping me breathe, advocating with the nurses when I needed ice chips or wanted to change positions. And that's when I realized I needed to make the calls. "I should tell our families," I said during a brief break between contractions. "They'll want to know," David nodded. "My parents are probably already up. Should I call them first?" "Let me call mine. Then you can call yours." I picked up my phone with trembling hands, partly from adrenaline, partly from anticipation. This was the call I'd been imagining for months. The moment when I would tell my parents that their grandchild was on the way, that today was the day they'd been waiting for, that they needed to come to the hospital because their family was about to grow. I dialed Mom's number, my heart racing with more than just labor pains. Despite everything, despite years of feeling like the second-choice daughter, despite the constant comparison to Sophia, despite the way they'd seemed more interested in their new social life than my pregnancy, this felt different. This was their grandchild. This was the moment that would surely bring us all together. The phone rang twice before Mom answered, her voice slightly groggy. "Mia? Honey, it's so early. Is everything okay?" "Mom," I said, and my voice caught with emotion and excitement. "It's time. I'm in labor. We're at the hospital. The baby's coming today." There was a pause. Not the stunned silence of joy and excitement I'd been expecting, more like the pause of someone processing an inconvenience. "Oh," she said. "Oh my. Today?" "Yes, today. Can you believe it? After all these months, it's actually happening." "Dr. Rodriguez says probably 8 more hours, maybe less. Can you and Dad come? I really want you here." Another contraction started building, and I had to pause to breathe through it. When it passed, Mom was talking. "Well, sweetie, that's wonderful news. It really is. But today is... oh goodness, today is Richard's retirement dinner. You remember Richard Weatherby?" Dad's been planning this speech for weeks. The whole country club will be there. It's black tie. I stared at the phone, certain I'd misheard. Mom, I'm having your grandchild today. Your first grandchild. I know. Honey, and we're so excited. But this dinner, it's been planned for months. Richard specifically asked your father to speak. The Weatherbys have been so good to us since we moved to Brookstone. We can't just not show up. The next contraction hit harder than any before it, and this time it wasn't just physical pain. It was the sharp, breath-stealing realization that my parents were about to choose a dinner party over the birth of their grandchild. Mom, I managed when the contraction passed. This is your grandchild. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. And we'll celebrate properly tomorrow, sweetheart. We'll come first thing in the morning with flowers and gifts. But tonight, we really can't miss this dinner. You understand, don't you? You know how important our relationships in the community are. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. David looked at me with concern. What happened? What did she say? I couldn't speak for a moment. Another contraction was building, but this time the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation spreading through my chest. They're not coming, I finally whispered. They have a dinner party. And that's when I realized that some moments reveal people's true priorities with devastating clarity. I was about to bring their grandchild into the world, and my parents had just told me they'd rather eat salmon and make small talk with their country club friends. The day I'd been dreaming about for 9 months had just become something else, entirely. It had become the day I learned exactly where I stood in my parents' list of priorities, and I was nowhere near the top. David stared at me in disbelief. A dinner party? Did you tell her you're in labor? Like, active labor? I nodded, unable to form words as another contraction built. This one felt different, angrier, more intense, as if my body was responding to the emotional blow by accelerating everything. I gripped the bed rail and tried to breathe through it, but all I could think about was my mother's voice saying, "black tie," like those 2 words explained everything. When the contraction passed, David was already reaching for his phone. I'm calling them back. This is insane. Don't, I said quickly. Please don't. Mia, they don't understand what they're saying. Nobody chooses a dinner over their grandchild being born. Nobody. But I knew better. David came from a family where Patricia had driven 3 hours in a snowstorm just to bring me homemade soup when I had morning sickness. Where Robert had spent his weekends building a toy chest for a grandchild he'd never met. Where love showed. Up in actions, not just words. My family was different. Love came with conditions, with schedules, with explanations about why other things mattered more. You don't understand, I said, settling back against the pillows. This isn't new. This is just the biggest version of something that's been happening my whole life. David pulled his chair closer to my bed. What do you mean? I looked out the window at the morning light filtering through the hospital garden. How could I explain? 27 years of being the daughter who came second? How could I make him understand that this phone call wasn't shocking to me? It was just the most painful confirmation of something I'd always known. When I was 8, I began. I had the lead role in our school's spring play. I was a sunflower, in this little production about gardens. I practiced my lines for weeks. It was the first time I'd ever been chosen for something important. The first time I wasn't just part of the chorus. Another contraction interrupted, and David held my hand. Through it. When it passed, I continued. The play was on a Thursday night. That morning, Sophia, she was only 5 then, fell off her bike and scraped her knee pretty badly. Nothing serious, just a lot of crying and some bandages. But Mom decided Sophia was too traumatized to be left with a babysitter, and Dad had an important client dinner he couldn't miss. They missed your play? They missed my play. I stood on that little stage wearing my yellow sunflower costume that Mom had spent hours making, and I looked out at all the other parents with their Cameras and flowers, and my seat was empty. The memory still stung, even 20 years later. Mrs. Patterson, my second-grade teacher, had taken pictures for me and driven me home afterward, making cheerful conversation about how well I'd done while I sat in the back seat trying not to cry. When I got home, Mom felt terrible. She apologized and said we'd celebrate over the weekend. But by Saturday, the moment had passed. The magic of being the sunflower, of having my big moment, was gone. You can't recreate something like that. David squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating for a kid. It was a pattern, I continued. When I made honor roll in 6th grade, they missed the ceremony because Sophia had a gymnastics meet. When I graduated high school as salutatorian, they almost missed that too because Sophia had a college interview the same weekend. They made it to the graduation, but they left during the reception to drive her to her interview. I shifted positions, trying to find comfort as another wave of pain built. Don't get me wrong, Sophia's stuff was important too. But somehow, my stuff was always the thing that could be rescheduled, postponed, or missed entirely. Sophia's events were immovable. Mine were suggestions. The contraction peaked, and I had to stop talking to focus on breathing. David rubbed my back, and I could see the understanding dawning in his eyes. This wasn't just about a dinner party. This was about a lifetime of being the accommodating daughter, the one who understood, the one who didn't make waves. When I got engaged, I said when I could speak again, I called to tell them. Mom was so excited, asking about venues and dates and guest lists. But then Sophia announced she was moving to the city for her new job, and suddenly all the family energy shifted to helping her find an apartment, co-signing her lease, buying her furniture. My wedding planning became something I did mostly by myself, David frowned. But they came to the wedding, right? They were there for that. They were there, I confirmed. But 2 days before the ceremony, Sophia had a panic attack about her new job. Mom spent most of my rehearsal dinner on the phone with her, talking her through her anxiety. Even at my own wedding, I was competing for attention. I paused as another contraction built, this one strong enough to make me grip David's hand until I was sure I was hurting him. When it passed, I felt tears starting to build. The thing is, I kept thinking it would change. I kept thinking that someday there would be a moment so important, so undeniably significant, that I would finally be the priority, that I would finally matter more than whatever else was happening in Sophia's life or their social calendar. I looked down at my belly, where my baby was working hard to enter the world. I thought this would be that moment. I thought becoming a grandmother would flip some switch in my mother that would make her realize this was bigger than dinner parties and social obligations. David's eyes were soft with understanding and anger. This should be that moment. But it's not. And that's what hurts the most. If having their first grandchild isn't enough to make them choose me, to make them show up, then nothing ever will be. This is literally the biggest thing that will ever happen in my life, and they're treating it like an inconvenience. The tears came then, mixing with the physical exhaustion of labor and the emotional devastation of final understanding. Do you know what this means, David? This means that in 40 years, when I tell our child about the day they were born, I'll have to explain why their grandparents weren't there. I'll have to find a way to tell our baby that Grandma and Grandpa had something more important to do. We don't have to tell them that, David said softly. I won't lie to our child about family, but I also won't let them grow up feeling the way I did, like they're always competing for love and attention. If my parents can't show up for the most important day of my life, then they've shown me exactly how much I can count on them for the most important days of our child's life. Another contraction hit, stronger than before, and I realized through the pain that something fundamental had shifted inside me. It wasn't just my body preparing to bring my baby into the world. It was my heart preparing to protect that baby from the kind of conditional love I'd grown up with. "This baby is going to know they're someone's first priority," I said when the contraction passed. "Even if it's not their grandparents." David nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Especially ours." As the morning progressed and my labor intensified, I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging alongside the physical pain. My parents had given me an unexpected gift in their absence. They'd shown me exactly what kind of grandmother and grandfather they would be, the kind who show up when it's convenient, who prioritize social obligations over family milestones, who would teach my child the same lessons about conditional love that I'd spent years learning. And in showing me that, they'd also shown me what I needed to protect my child from. The baby I was about to meet would never wonder if they mattered. They would never compete for attention with dinner parties or social calendars. They would never feel like the afterthought in their own family story, because I was about to become the kind of mother I'd always wished I had, the kind who shows up no matter what. By noon, my contractions were coming every 2 minutes, and Dr. Rodriguez estimated I was about halfway through labor. David had been incredible. He'd somehow managed to transform our sterile hospital room into something that felt almost cozy. He'd dimmed the lights, connected my phone to a small speaker to play the peaceful playlist we'd prepared, and had been feeding me ice chips and encouraging words for hours. But as much as I appreciated his support, and as much as I loved seeing his excitement build with each update from the medical team, there was still an ache in my chest that had nothing to do with labor pains. "David," I said during a brief lull between contractions, "I keep thinking about what I said earlier, about my parents. Maybe I was too harsh." He looked up from the sandwich Patricia had brought him. His mother had arrived at 10 a.m. with a care package that included snacks, phone chargers, comfortable pillows, and a hand-knitted blanket for the baby. She'd hugged me gently, whispered that she was praying for us, and promised to be in the waiting room for as long as we needed her. "Too harsh?" David raised an eyebrow. "Mia, they chose a dinner party over your labor." I know. But I paused as another contraction began building. But maybe they just didn't understand. Maybe when Mom said black tie dinner, she was thinking it was early labor and I'd be in the hospital for another 12 hours. Maybe she thought they could do both. David set down his sandwich and moved his chair closer to my bed. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that this is their first grandchild, and maybe they're just scared? Or maybe they don't realize how important this is to me. I mean, I've always been the independent one, right? The one who doesn't need anything from anybody." Contraction peaked, and I gripped the bed rail, breathing through it with the techniques our birthing class had taught us. When it passed, I felt that familiar tug of hope that had gotten me into trouble so many times before. Maybe I should call them again. Maybe I should explain better. Tell them how much I need them here. How much this means to me. David's expression was gentle but concerned. "Are you sure?" The last call didn't go well. But I didn't really explain myself, I said, reaching for my phone. I just assumed they'd understand. Maybe they need me to actually ask for what I need instead of expecting them to just know. It was a pattern I'd fallen into my whole life, hoping that people would read my mind, understand my needs without me having to voice them, then feeling disappointed when they didn't. Maybe this time, if I was direct and honest about how much their presence meant to me, things would be different. I dialed Mom's number with shaking hands, partly from the physical exertion of labor, partly from nervous anticipation. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Mia, how are you feeling, sweetie? Is the baby here yet?" Her voice sounded cheerful, normal, like we were just having a regular conversation about regular things. Like she hadn't just told me a few hours earlier that she was choosing a dinner party over the birth of her grandchild. "No, not yet," I said. "Dr. Rodriguez thinks probably another 6 hours or so. Mom, I wanted to call back because I don't think I explained myself very well earlier." "Oh, honey, you don't need to explain anything. Labor is exhausting. I remember when I had you and Sophia, I could barely think straight. That's just it, though. I am thinking straight, and I really need you and Dad here. This isn't just about the baby being born. It's about me needing my mom. I need you to hold my hand and tell me I'm strong enough to do this. I need Dad to pace around the waiting room and hand out cigars like grandfathers do in old movies. I could hear voices in the background, the sound of people talking and laughing, the clink of dishes. They were already getting ready for their evening. Mia, sweetheart, you know we want to be there for you. But this dinner tonight, it's not just any dinner. Richard Weatherby is retiring after 35 years at the dealership. The whole community is going to be there. Your father is giving the keynote speech. Mom, I said, and I could hear my voice starting to shake. I'm giving birth to your grandchild today. Your first grandchild. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Richard Weatherby's retirement dinner is important, but this is your family. Another contraction started building, and I had to pause. David took my free hand and squeezed it, his eyes full of concern as he watched me navigate both physical and emotional pain simultaneously. Honey, I know this feels really important right now, but babies are born every day. Richard only retires once, and frankly, we've already RSVP'd, and your father's speech is printed and ready. We can't just not show up. What would people think? What would people think? There it was. The phrase that had governed so many of my parents' decisions over the years. The invisible audience that always seemed to matter more than their actual family. They'd think you have your priorities straight, I said. But even as I said it, I knew it was pointless. They'd think you're the kind of people who choose family over social obligations. Mia, you're being dramatic. You have David there, and his mother seems lovely. You'll hardly notice we're not there. And we'll come tomorrow morning with flowers and presents, and we'll celebrate properly then. The contraction peaked. And this time I couldn't hold back a small cry of pain. When it passed, I realized there were tears on my cheeks. Mom, I will notice you're not here. I will notice that my parents missed the most important day of my life for a dinner party. I will remember this forever. Oh, honey, don't be so serious. It's just timing. Bad timing, that's all. These things happen. No, I said. And something in my voice must have surprised her because she went quiet. These things don't just happen. These things are choices. You're choosing to prioritize the Weatherbys and the country club and what people might think over your daughter and your grandchild. That's not fair, Mia. You know we love you. Do I? Because I'm lying in a hospital bed about to give birth to your grandchild, and you just told me that other people's opinions matter more than being here with me. The background noise on her end of the call had gotten louder. I could hear someone calling her name, asking about appetizer timing. Mia, I have to go. The caterers are here, and you know how these things get. We'll call you later to check in. Okay? Give our love to David. She hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone in my hand, unable to believe what had just happened. I'd laid my heart bare, explained exactly why I needed them, asked directly for their support, and the response was that caterers needed attention. What did she say? David asked gently. She said babies are born every day, but Richard Weatherby only retires once. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. She said I'm being dramatic. David's jaw tightened. You're not being dramatic. You're asking for your parents to show up for the birth of their grandchild. That's literally the most reasonable request in the world. But as I lay there, processing the conversation, I realized something profound. I hadn't been unclear the first time I called. They had understood perfectly. This second call hadn't been about miscommunication. It had been about me desperately hoping that if I asked nicely enough, if I explained well enough, if I made myself vulnerable enough, they would choose me. But they already had chosen. They'd chosen the Weatherbys and the country club and their social standing. They'd chosen their image over their daughter, And now I had to choose what to do with that information. Another contraction built, stronger than any before, and this time I felt something shift inside me. Not just physically, though the baby was, definitely getting ready to make their appearance. Emotionally, the part of me that had spent 27 years hoping my parents would finally prioritize me was finally, painfully, letting go of that hope. They weren't coming. They had never really been coming, and it was time for me to stop begging them to love me the way I deserved to be loved. It was time to focus on the family that was actually showing up. At 4:30 p.m., just as Dr. Rodriguez was telling us we were in the final stages of labor, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sophia's name, and for a split second, my heart leaped with hope. Maybe she was calling to say she was on her way, or that she'd convinced Mom and Dad to skip their dinner. Maybe family loyalty ran deeper than I thought. Sophia? I answered breathlessly, pausing between contractions. Mia! Oh my God, I just heard. Mom texted me that you're in labor. How exciting! Her voice was bright and cheerful, the way it always was when she was about to ask for something or when she had news she thought would overshadow whatever else was happening. Yeah, we've been here since early this morning. The baby should be here in the next couple of hours. Another contraction started building, and I had to pause. Are you coming? Oh, sweetie, I wish I could. But I'm actually in the middle of something huge. You know how I told you about the London position? Well, they flew me out here for final interviews, and tonight is this amazing networking dinner with all the executives. It could literally change my entire career trajectory. I gripped the phone tighter. You're in London? Right now? I know, the timing is crazy, right? But this opportunity just came up so suddenly. I fly back tomorrow night. But don't worry. I'll come visit as soon as I get back. I already ordered the most adorable baby gift online. You're going to love it. The contraction peaked, and I had to breathe through it before I could respond. Sophia, this is your niece or nephew being born today, your first niece or nephew. And I'm so excited to meet them. But Mia, you have to understand. This is the job I've been working toward my entire career. I can't just walk out of dinner with the VP of International Development because my sister is having a baby. Besides, David's there with you, right? And his family? I stared at the ceiling, feeling like I was trapped in some alternate reality, where everyone I was related to had collectively lost their minds. Sophia, do you hear yourself right now? You're saying you can't leave a dinner for your niece or nephew being born? It's not just a dinner, Mia. It's my future. And honestly, the baby will still be there when I get back. It's not like they're going anywhere. The casual way she said it, like my child was a piece of furniture that would wait around for her, convenience, sent a shock of anger through me that was almost as intense as the labor pains. Where did you get this idea that your career is more important than family? Where did you get the idea that having a baby makes you the center of the universe? She shot back, and for the first time in the conversation, her cheerful mask slipped. Mia, you've always been so dramatic about everything. Remember when you cried for a week because Mom and Dad missed your high school play for my college interview? I was trying to get into Northwestern. That was actually important. Important? I could barely get the word out. My high school play was important to me. Just like this baby is important to me. Just like I thought my family was important to. My family? Oh, please, you're acting like we're abandoning you forever. We'll all be there for the baby's life. Missing the actual birth doesn't mean we don't care. Another contraction hit, and this time it was so intense I couldn't hold back a cry of pain. David immediately moved to my side, coaching me through, the breathing while shooting concerned looks at the phone in my hand. Sophia, I said when I could speak again. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. If this was you having a baby, would you expect Mom and Dad to show up? There was a pause. That's different. How? How is it different? Because I wouldn't have a baby unless everything was perfect. The timing, the career stability, the financial security. I wouldn't put people in the position of having to choose between my life events and their other obligations. The words hit me like a physical blow. So this is my fault? For having a baby when it wasn't convenient for everyone else's schedules? I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying you can't expect the world to stop because you decided to have a baby now instead of waiting until you were more established. More established? Sophia, I'm 27 years old. I'm married. I have a stable job, and we planned this pregnancy. What exactly should I have waited for? Maybe for a time when you didn't have to live in that tiny apartment in Millbrook. Maybe until David had a better job. Maybe until you could afford to have a baby without it being such a production. Production. She thought my pregnancy, my labor, my child was a production, an inconvenience that I'd forced on everyone else. You know what, Sophia? You're right. I am making a production out of this. Because bringing a life into the world should be a production. It should be celebrated and witnessed and treated like the miracle it is. But apparently, our family saves productions for retirement dinners and networking events. Mia, you're being unfair. Just because we can't drop everything doesn't mean we don't care about you. Actually, it does. That's exactly what it means. When someone you love is going through the most important day of their life, you drop everything. That's what love looks like. That's what showing up means. I could hear voices in the background of her call, sophisticated accents, the clink of wine glasses, laughter. She was literally at her networking dinner while talking to me. Look, I have to go. The CEO just walked in and I need to make an impression. But congratulations. And I'll call you tomorrow to hear all about everything, okay? Sophia, wait. But she was already gone. I set the phone down and looked at David, who had been listening to the entire conversation with an expression of growing disbelief. She's at a networking dinner in London, I said flatly. She says the baby will still be here when she gets back. Jesus Christ, David muttered, then immediately apologized. Sorry, I know that's your sister, but no, don't apologize. You're right, this is insane. Another contraction started, and I had to pause. David, my entire family has abandoned me today. My parents are at a retirement dinner for someone they barely know, and my sister is schmoozing with executives in London. They all think their social and professional obligations are more important than their grandchild and niece or nephew being born. It's not about the baby, David said quietly. It's about you. They're telling you that you don't matter enough to them. And there it was. The truth I'd been dancing around all day. This wasn't really about the baby, though that made it infinitely more painful. This was about me, about the daughter and sister who had never been important enough to rearrange schedules for, never been worth inconveniencing themselves for, never been the priority when push came to shove. You know what the worst part is? I said, breathing through another contraction. I'm not even surprised. I'm heartbroken, but I'm not surprised. And that says everything about the kind of family I come from. Dr. Rodriguez chose that moment to check in, announcing that it was time to start pushing. As she prepared for the final stage of labor, I realized that in the span of one phone call, Sophia had managed to make something crystal clear. My family didn't see this as the joyous, once-in-a-lifetime event that it was. They saw it as an inconvenience, a scheduling conflict, a production that I was selfishly inflicting on their important lives. But as I prepared to meet my child, I also realized something else. I was about to become someone's entire world. Someone who would love me unconditionally, who would think I was worth showing up for, who would never see me as an inconvenience or a production. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The family I'd been born into had chosen their priorities. Now it was time for me to choose mine. And my priority was about to take their first breath in the next hour. Everyone else could stay at their dinners. As I pushed through the final stages of labor, my mind kept circling back to Sophia's words. You've always been so dramatic about everything. The comment stung because it revealed how my family had reframed every moment of hurt I'd ever expressed, not as legitimate pain, but as me being too sensitive or making a big deal out of nothing. Between contractions, I found myself remembering things I'd buried for years, patterns that suddenly seemed impossible to ignore. When I was 12, our family dog, Chester, got hit by a car. I was devastated. Chester had been my constant companion since I was 4, sleeping in my bed every night, following me around the house like a shadow. When he died, I cried for days. Mom's response? "Mia, you need to get over this. It's just a dog. Sophia is starting middle school next week, and we need to focus on getting her ready. She's nervous enough without you being dramatic about Chester." Just a dog. The creature who had been my best friend for 8 years was dismissed as unworthy of grief because my sister needed school supplies, or when I was 16 and my boyfriend Jake broke up with me right before junior prom. I'd been planning for months. We'd coordinated our outfits, made dinner reservations, arranged photos with friends. When he suddenly decided he wanted to take Madison Fletcher instead, I was heartbroken and humiliated. Dad's advice? "Mia, you're being too emotional about this. Boys your age are fickle. Sophia got accepted to 3 AP classes for next year. Let's focus on celebrating real achievements instead of dwelling on teenage drama." Real achievements. My heartbreak was teenage drama, but Sophia's class schedule was a real achievement, worthy of family celebration. The pattern was always the same. Whenever I experienced pain, disappointment, or even joy that required attention, there was always something more important happening with Sophia, or something more pressing in my parents' social calendar, or some reason why my feelings were too much or inappropriate timing. When I got my first job at 16, hostessing at Romano's Italian restaurant, I was so proud. I'd filled out applications for weeks, gone through interviews, and finally gotten hired. I rushed home to tell my parents, expecting them to be excited about my responsibility and work ethic. Instead, I walked into a house in chaos. Sophia had gotten a C+ on her chemistry midterm, and my parents were in full crisis mode, calling tutors and discussing whether she needed to drop her extracurricular activities to focus on academics. "That's nice, honey," Mom said distractedly when I announced my job. "Can we talk about this later? Your sister needs our attention right now." My first job, my first step toward independence and adulthood, was reduced to, "That's nice, honey," because Sophia had gotten a grade that was actually perfectly acceptable, but it wasn't just the big moments. It was 1,000 small moments that had shaped my understanding of my place in the family hierarchy. When I made varsity soccer as a sophomore, something that almost never happened at our competitive high school, my parents missed my first game because they were helping Sophia shop for homecoming dresses. When I scored the winning goal in our district championship, they missed that too because Sophia had a piano recital the same day. "We're so proud of you, sweetie," Mom had said when I came home with my championship medal. "But you understand, Sophia's been practicing that Chopin piece for months." I understood, all right. I understood that my athletic achievements, no matter how significant, would always take a back seat to Sophia's hobbies. When I graduated high school as salutatorian, second in my class out of 247 students, my parents almost missed the ceremony because Sophia had scheduled her Northwestern interview for the same weekend. They made it to the graduation, but spent the entire reception on the phone with Sophia, coaching her through interview anxiety. The valedictorian's parents threw a huge party. My parents took me to Applebee's for a quick dinner before rushing home to continue Sophia's interview prep. "You're so independent, Mia," Dad had said over our hurried meal. "You don't need all the fuss. Sophia's more sensitive. She needs more support." Independent. That was the label they'd given me to justify their neglect. Because I didn't fall apart when they disappointed me. Because I learned to manage my own emotions and expectations. Because I stopped asking for their attention. They decided I didn't need it. But the truth was, I'd learned not to need it because needing it hurt too much when it didn't come. Even my wedding planning had been an exercise in competing for attention. When David and I got engaged, I was over the moon. We'd been together for 3 years and I'd never been happier. I called my parents immediately, expecting them to be thrilled about gaining David as a son-in-law. They'd always liked him. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," Mom had said. "We're actually just heading into the country club for the Weatherby's anniversary party, but let's talk details tomorrow." Tomorrow turned into next week, which turned into next month, because Sophia had decided to apply to graduate school and needed help with her applications, her personal statements, her interview preparation. By the time my parents focused on wedding planning, David and I had already booked our venue, chosen our photographer, and ordered my dress. They showed up to provide opinions on decisions that had already been made. "You're so organized, Mia," Mom had said approvingly. "You don't really need our help with any of this." But I'd wanted their help. I'd wanted their excitement, their opinions, their involvement. I'd wanted to feel like my wedding was important enough to interrupt their other activities. Instead, 2 days before the ceremony, when I should have been relaxing and enjoying the anticipation, I spent 3 hours on the phone with Mom while she talked Sophia through a panic attack about her first week at her new graduate program. Even at my own rehearsal dinner, Mom stepped outside twice to call Sophia, who was having adjustment anxiety about living in a new city. "She just needs extra support right now," Mom had explained when she returned to the table where my future in-laws were politely pretending not to notice her absence. "You understand. I always understood. That was my role in the family. The understanding one. The one who didn't make waves. The one who graciously accepted less attention, less priority, less consideration because I was mature enough to handle it. But as I lay in that hospital bed, working to bring my child into the world while my parents sipped wine at a retirement dinner and my sister networked in London, I realized something profound. I hadn't been mature. I'd been trained. Trained to accept crumbs and call them a feast. Trained to minimize my own needs so that other people's comfort could be maintained. Trained to be grateful for the bare minimum of attention and consideration. And now they expected me to understand why they couldn't be bothered to show up for the birth of their grandchild. Another contraction hit, and as I pushed through it, I felt something shift inside me that had nothing to do with labor. For 27 years, I'd been the accommodating daughter, the understanding sister, the one who made everything easier for everyone else by requiring less. But I was about to become someone's mother, and that child was going to learn a different definition of love, one where showing up wasn't negotiable, where their important moments wouldn't be interrupted by other people's priorities, where they wouldn't have to compete for attention and affection. They were going to learn what it felt like to be someone's first choice. Always, because I was about to break a cycle that had gone on long enough. At 7:43 p.m., after 14 hours of labor, our daughter took her first breath. The moment she emerged, slippery and screaming and absolutely perfect, the entire world shifted on its axis. Dr. Rodriguez placed her on my chest, and I looked down at this tiny, furious creature who had been growing inside me for 9 months. And I understood for the first time what people meant when they talked about instantaneous, overwhelming love. "She's beautiful," David whispered, his voice thick with tears. "Mia, look at her. She's absolutely beautiful." She was, even covered in vernix and birth fluids, even red-faced and angry about being evicted from her warm home. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Her little fists were clenched tight, her eyes squeezed shut against the bright lights of the delivery room, her tiny mouth open in protest at this strange new world. "Hello, baby girl," I whispered, my own tears falling freely now. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting so long to meet you." The nurses moved around us efficiently, checking vitals, cleaning up, preparing for the next stages of immediate postpartum care. But all I could focus on was this perfect little person who was now breathing air for the first time, whose heart was beating outside of my body, who was beginning her own separate existence in the world. David cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands, and when they placed her back on my chest for skin-to-skin contact, she immediately settled, her crying subsiding into little snuffles and sighs. It was like she knew she was exactly where she belonged. "What are we going to name her?" David asked softly, stroking her tiny hand with one finger. We'd had a list of possibilities, but looking at her now, only one name felt right. "Luna," I said without hesitation. "She's Luna." "Luna," David repeated, testing it out. "It's perfect." And it was. Luna, like the moon, mysterious and luminous and powerful. Like something that could light up the darkness, that could pull tides and influence dreams. She felt like magic in my arms, like a miracle I'd somehow been trusted to protect and nurture. But as I held her, as David and I marveled over her tiny fingernails and perfect little ears, I became acutely aware of the empty spaces in the room. The places where my parents should have been standing, where Sophia should have been crying happy tears, where grandparents should have been taking pictures and making plans to spoil their first grandchild. Patricia had been in the waiting room for hours, and the moment Dr. Rodriguez gave the okay, she appeared in our doorway with tears streaming down her face. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, approaching our bed like she was entering a sacred space. "She's absolutely perfect. Look at all that dark hair." She didn't rush to take Luna from me or immediately start giving advice. She just stood there, hands clasped together, beaming at her new granddaughter with pure joy. Would it be okay if I held her for just a moment?" Patricia asked. I handed Luna over carefully, watching as Patricia cradled her with the expertise of someone who remembered exactly how to hold a newborn. "Hello, sweet Luna," she murmured. "I'm your grandma, Patricia. I love you so much already." David's Father Robert arrived 20 minutes later, still in his work clothes because he'd left the office the moment he got David's text. He took one look at Luna in Patricia's arms and got choked up. "She's something else," he said gruffly, clearly trying not to cry. "Just look at her. David, she looks just like you did when you were born." They stayed for an hour, taking turns, holding Luna, asking about labor, making sure I was comfortable, planning when they could come back to help us at home. When they finally left, they hugged us both and promised to bring dinner tomorrow. "We're so proud of you," Patricia whispered to me as she left. "You did something incredible today." After they left, the room felt suddenly quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind of quiet that highlighted what was missing rather than celebrating what was present. David was texting photos to his siblings, getting excited responses and promises of visits. His phone was buzzing constantly with congratulations and questions about when they could meet their new niece. My phone was silent. I picked it up and scrolled through my messages. Nothing new from my parents. Nothing from Sophia. I checked social media and saw that Mom had posted photos from the retirement dinner 2 hours ago. Her and Dad dressed in formal wear, smiling at their table with the Weatherbees, raising champagne, glasses in a toast. While I was pushing their granddaughter into the world, they were posing for pictures at someone else's party. The contrast was so stark it took my breath away. On one side, I had in-laws who had rearranged their entire day to be present for this moment, who were already planning how to support us as new parents, who had welcomed Luna like she was the most important person they'd ever met. On the other side, I had parents who were posting dinner party photos while their daughter gave birth. "Do you want to try nursing?" the nurse asked gently, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. I nodded and she helped me position Luna correctly. The moment was awkward at first. We were both learning. But then Luna latched on, and I felt that same overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness. This was what mattered. This tiny person depending on me, trusting me, needing me. This was my real family now, David, Luna, and me. The family we'd created together, the family that would show up for each other no matter what. As Luna nursed, I found myself talking to her quietly. I'm going to tell you something, little girl. You are the most important thing that has ever happened to me. You are going to grow up knowing that you matter, that your moments are sacred, that the people who love you will move heaven and earth to be there for you. David looked up from his phone. What are you saying to her? I'm making her promises, I said. I'm promising her that she'll never have to wonder if she's worth showing up for. David's expression softened. She won't. She'll never wonder about that. A knock on the door interrupted us, and for a split second, my heart leaped. Maybe my parents had left the dinner early. Maybe they'd realized what they were missing and rushed to the hospital, but it was just the night nurse coming to check on Luna's vitals and help us with discharge paperwork. She's beautiful, the nurse said, checking Luna's temperature. First, baby? Yes, I said. Are the grandparents excited? I paused, not sure how to answer that question. Some of them are, I finally said. The nurse must have heard something in my tone because she looked at me with understanding eyes. Well, the ones who matter are here, right? I looked at David, who was already pulling up the hospital Wi-Fi to show his sister a video call with Luna. I looked at Luna, who was now sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely content and secure. Yeah, I said. The ones who matter are here. And as I said it, I realized it was true. The people who had shown up, David, Patricia, Robert, were the ones who mattered. The people who had chosen dinner parties and networking events over this moment had shown me exactly how much I could count on them for the important moments in Luna's life, which was not at all. But that was okay, because Luna was going to grow up surrounded by people who understood that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. It's showing up when showing up matters. It's being present for the moments that can't be replanned or rescheduled, or made up for later. Luna was going to know what real love looked like, and she was never, ever going to have to compete for it. As the evening settled around us and Luna slept in my arms, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete certainty about my priorities. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I stood and exactly what mattered. My parents had made their choice. Now, I was going to make mine. The first text message arrived at 10:47 p.m., just as I was finally settling into an exhausted doze with Luna sleeping on my chest. Heard the wonderful news. Congratulations. How are you feeling? Sorry we missed it. Dinner ran so late. Can't wait to meet our granddaughter tomorrow. Love, Mom and Dad. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before showing it to David. The casual tone, the exclamation points, the sorry we missed it, like they'd missed a casual coffee date instead of the birth of their first grandchild. Dinner. Ran late? David said incredulously. They make it sound like they got stuck in traffic. 20 minutes later, another text. Just saw David's mom posted on Facebook. She looks absolutely perfect. What did you name her? Dad says to tell you he's very proud. We'll bring flowers tomorrow. The fact that they'd learned their granddaughter's name from Patricia's Facebook post rather than from us told me everything I needed to know about their priorities. But I was too exhausted to process it fully that night. Luna needed to eat every 2 hours. The nurses were checking on us regularly. And my body was recovering from the most physically demanding experience of my life. I fell asleep with my phone on silent, choosing to focus on my daughter rather than my disappointment. The next morning brought a parade of inadequate gestures that somehow made everything worse. At 8 a.m., a delivery arrived, a massive floral arrangement that was so large the nurses had to move furniture to fit it in our room. The card read, For our beautiful granddaughter and her wonderful mother. With all our love, Grandma Claire and Grandpa Marcus. P.S. The Weatherbys send their congratulations too. Even their flower card included other people. David stared at the arrangement, which was admittedly stunning. Dozens of pink roses, baby's breath, and some expensive-looking orchids that probably cost more than our weekly grocery budget. They spent more on flowers than most people spend on rent, he said quietly. An hour later, my phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen, and against my better judgment, I answered. Mia, sweetheart, how are you feeling? We've been thinking about you all morning. Her voice was bright and cheerful, like we were having a normal conversation about normal things. I'm tired, I said simply. Of course you are. Labor is exhausting. I remember when I had you, I was in bed for 3 days afterward. But it's all worth it, isn't it? When you see that little face? Yes, it's worth it. And Luna, what a beautiful name. Very unique. We're so excited to meet her. Did you get our flowers? We wanted to send something special. Yes, we got them. Thank you. Good. Now, we were thinking we'd come by this afternoon. Maybe around 2? After you've had time to rest and get settled. We don't want to overwhelm you. I almost laughed. Overwhelm me? They'd missed the most overwhelming moment of my life for a dinner party. But now they were worried about overwhelming me with a visit. Actually, Mom, I'm not really ready for visitors yet. Oh, nonsense. We're not visitors, we're family. Besides, we have gifts. Your father picked out the most adorable little outfit. Pink with tiny flowers. And I found this gorgeous baby book. You'll love it. Gifts. They thought gifts would make up for their absence. Mom, I said, I'm not ready. Mia, sweetheart, I know you're tired and probably a little emotional. Hormones after birth can be quite intense, but you can't keep us from meeting our granddaughter indefinitely. We're her grandparents. There it was. The dismissal of my feelings as hormones and emotions, the insistence on their rights as grandparents despite their absence when it mattered most. You're right, I said. You are her grandparents. But yesterday, when she was being born, you were her grandparents too, and you chose not to be here. Mia, we've been through this. The timing was impossible. The Weatherby dinner was planned, months in advance. We couldn't just— You could have, I interrupted. You could have absolutely just left a dinner party when your daughter went into labor. People do it all the time. It's called having priorities. That's not fair. You know how important our relationships in the community are. Richard Weatherby has been instrumental in your father's business connections. We couldn't just walk out on his retirement celebration? More important than your granddaughter being born? Of course not. But Mia, babies are born every day. Richard only retires once. There it was again. The exact same phrase Sophia had used. Babies are born every day. Like Luna was just another statistic, another routine event that didn't warrant disrupting their social calendar. Mom, Luna isn't just any baby. She's your granddaughter. Your first granddaughter. And her birth wasn't just any day. It was the most important day of my life. And we'll celebrate it properly. We're coming this afternoon with gifts and flowers and— No, you're not. What? I said no. You're not coming this afternoon. You're not coming today at all. Mia, you're being unreasonable. We understand you're upset about the timing, but we can't change what happened. We're here now, ready to celebrate. You're not here now. You're on the phone, making demands about when you can visit, acting like flowers and gifts erase the fact that you abandoned me when I needed you most. Abandoned? Mia, that's so dramatic. We didn't abandon you. We had a prior commitment. A prior commitment to salmon and small talk. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. None of this is fair. It's not fair that I had to give birth without my mother. It's not fair that Luna's first day in the world was marked by her grandparents' absence. It's not fair that you think an expensive flower arrangement makes up for missing the most important moment of your daughter's life. There was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Mom spoke, and her voice had shifted from cheerful to hurt. "Mia, I don't understand why you're being so hostile. We're trying to make this right." "You can't make this right. You can't unbirth Luna and be there this time. You can't undo the fact that when I called you in labor, scared and needing my mom, you told me a retirement dinner was more important. We never said it was more important. You didn't have to say it. You showed it. Actions speak louder than words, Mom. And your actions told me that your social standing matters more than your family." Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice had turned cold, the way it always did when she was being criticized. "Well, I can see you're determined to punish us for this. But Mia, we're Luna's grandparents whether you like it or not. You can't keep us from her forever. I'm not keeping you from her. I'm protecting her from learning what I learned yesterday, that love comes with conditions and social calendars matter more than family milestones. You're being ridiculous." "Am I? Tell me, Mom. What would it have taken for you to leave that dinner? If I'd been in a car accident? If the hospital had called to say I was dying? That's completely different, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you'd have found a way to make it to the hospital if you'd really wanted to. You just didn't want to badly enough." I could hear Dad's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. Mom covered the phone, and I could hear muffled conversation before she came back on the line. "Your father says to tell you we love you and we're sorry you're upset. We'll give you some time to calm down, and we'll call again tomorrow." "Don't," I said. "Don't what?" "Don't call tomorrow. Don't call until you can acknowledge what you did wrong without making excuses. Don't call until you can admit that you failed Mia's parents yesterday, and don't show up here with gifts and flowers thinking they'll fix what you broke." "Mia," I hung up. David, who had been listening to the entire conversation while holding Luna, shook his head. "They still don't get it," he said. "No, they don't. And maybe they never will. But that's not my problem anymore." An hour later, another delivery arrived. This time it was an enormous gift basket filled with baby items, gourmet snacks, and a bottle of champagne. The card read, "For our precious granddaughter and her devoted parents. We love you more than words can say. Can't wait to spoil this little angel. XOXO, Grandma and Grandpa." I looked at the basket, then at Luna sleeping peacefully in her hospital bassinet, then at David who was watching me carefully. "Put it in the hallway," I said. "Give it to another family." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Luna doesn't need gifts from people who couldn't be bothered to show up for her birth. She needs grandparents who understand that presence is the only present that matters." As David moved the basket out of our room, I realized something important. My parents were trying to buy their way out of their failure with expensive flowers and elaborate gifts. They were trying to skip over accountability and jump straight to the happy family photos they wanted to post on social media. But some things can't be bought, some moments can't be replaced, and some failures can't be covered up with pretty wrapping paper and greeting card sentiments. They'd missed their chance to be the grandparents they claimed they wanted to be. Now they had to live with the consequences of that choice, and I had to decide what kind of protection Luna needed from people who thought love could be purchased after the fact. 3 days after bringing Luna home, I was sitting in our small living room at 3 a.m., nursing her while David slept. The apartment was quiet except for Luna's soft suckling sounds and the distant hum of late-night traffic. In the darkness, with my daughter warm against my chest, something shifted inside me with startling clarity. It wasn't a gradual realization or a slow building of resolve. It was instant and complete, like a light switch flipping on in a dark room. I looked down at Luna's perfect little face, her tiny hand curled against my skin, and I understood exactly what I needed to do. My phone sat on the coffee table, silent for the first time in days. No more texts from my parents asking when they could visit. No more calls from Sophia checking in when she had a minute. No more flower deliveries or gift baskets or desperate attempts to buy their way back into my good graces. The silence wasn't accidental. I'd blocked their numbers that morning after the 6th bouquet arrived. This one with a card that read, "We're sorry you're upset. Love always wins. Can't wait to be the best grandparents ever. Love always wins." As if love was what they'd been, showing me. As Luna finished nursing and settled into sleep, I found myself thinking about the conversation I'd had with David earlier that day. He'd been changing Luna's diaper while I pumped milk, and he'd asked the question that had been hovering, unspoken between us, "What do you want to do about your parents?" It was such a simple question, but it had taken me 3 days to realize I actually had a choice in the matter. For 27 years, I'd operated under the assumption that family was something that happened to you, not something you chose. Blood relations were permanent, non-negotiable, something you had to work around and accommodate regardless of how they treated you. But sitting there in the pre-dawn darkness, I realized that wasn't true. Family wasn't just about DNA. It was about showing up. It was about choosing each other, again and again, especially when it was inconvenient or difficult. My parents hadn't chosen me. Not really. Not when it mattered. They'd chosen the Weatherbys and the country club and their social standing. They'd chosen appearances over authenticity, networking over nurturing, status over substance. And they'd been making those choices my entire life. But I could choose differently for Luna. I pulled out my laptop and began typing. Not an angry email or a hurt letter full of accusations and demands for apologies. Something cleaner than that. Something final. "Dear Mom and Dad," I began, then stopped. Were they still Mom and Dad? What did those titles mean when the people wearing them had failed so completely at the jobs they described? I started again. "Dear Claire and Marcus, I've been thinking a lot over the past few days about what it means to be family, about what love looks like in action rather than in words, about what I want Luna to learn about relationships and priorities and showing up for the people who matter. You missed the birth of your granddaughter for a dinner party." That sentence is so absurd I can barely type it, yet it's exactly what happened. When I called you in labor, scared and needing my mother, you told me that Richard Weatherby's retirement was more important than your daughter and granddaughter. You've spent the days since trying to make up for that absence with flowers and gifts and cheerful phone calls, as if expensive bouquets could replace your presence at the most important moment of my life. You've called me dramatic and emotional and unreasonable for being hurt by your abandonment. But I'm not dramatic. I'm clear. Clearer than I've ever been about what I will and won't accept in my life and in my daughter's life. Luna is 3 days old, and she's already teaching me things I never knew I needed to learn. She's teaching me that love isn't something you say. It's something you do, consistently, without conditions, without excuses. She's teaching me that showing up isn't optional when you love someone. It's the baseline requirement. You had one, chance to witness her first breath, and you chose cocktails and small talk instead. You had one opportunity to be there when I needed you most, and you decided your social calendar was more important. Those aren't mistakes. Those are choices, and choices have consequences. I won't be calling you. I won't be answering your calls. I won't be bringing Luna to family gatherings or holiday celebrations where she'll learn that love comes with conditions and that dinner parties matter more than family milestones. This isn't about punishment or revenge. This is about protection. I'm protecting my daughter from learning the lesson I spent 27 years learning, that she has to compete for love, that her important moments are inconveniences, that the people who claim to love her will always have something more pressing to do. Luna will grow up knowing that she matters, that her milestones are sacred, that the people who love her will move heaven and earth to be present for her important moments. She will never wonder if she's worth showing up for, because the answer will be demonstrated to her every single day. I wanted you to be part of that love. I wanted you to be the grandparents who showed her what unconditional family love looked like. But you've shown me instead that your love comes with social calendars and prior commitments and explanations about why other things matter more. That's not the love I want Luna to learn. That's not the family I want her to know. You made your choice on the day she was born. Now I'm making mine. Don't contact us again. Don't send gifts. Don't show up at our apartment. Don't try to explain or justify or minimize what you did. Just live with the consequences of choosing a dinner party over your granddaughter's birth. If someday you want to understand what you lost, look at your social media photos from that night. Look at yourselves smiling and toasting with the Weatherbees while your granddaughter was taking her first breaths in a hospital room you couldn't be bothered to visit. Then imagine Luna, 20 years from now, looking at those same photos and understanding exactly where she ranked in your list of priorities. Mia. I read the letter 3 times, then saved it as a draft. I wasn't ready to send it yet, but writing it had clarified something essential. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about hurt feelings or disappointed expectations. This was about choice. Active, conscious choice about what kind of life I wanted to build for my daughter. I looked down at Luna, who was sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely trusting and secure. She had no idea that her grandparents existed. No idea that she was already being rejected by people she'd never met. No idea that her birth had been treated as less important than appetizers and wine, and if I had anything to say about it, she never would. Patricia had texted earlier asking if she could bring dinner tomorrow. Robert had called to see if we needed anything from the store. David's sister Emma was driving down this weekend just to meet Luna, rearranging her work schedule and canceling other plans without a second thought. That was what family looked like. That was what love in action meant. Luna stirred in my arms, making the soft sounds babies make when they're transitioning between sleep stages. I shifted her gently, supporting her head, marveling again at how perfectly she fit against my chest. "You're going to know you're loved," I whispered to her. "You're going to grow up in a family that chooses you every single day. You'll never have to wonder if you matter, because it will be obvious in every decision we make." As the sun began to rise outside our apartment window, painting the living room in soft pink light, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete certainty about my path forward. I wasn't the daughter who accepted less anymore. I wasn't the understanding one who made excuses for other people's failures. I wasn't the accommodating family member who adjusted her expectations to match other people's limited capacity for love. I was Luna's mother, and that meant being the fierce protector of her emotional well-being, the guardian of her sense of worth, the person who would make sure she never learned to settle for crumbs when she deserved the whole feast. My parents had taught me exactly what I didn't want Luna to experience, and now I was going to spend the rest of my life making sure she never did. I sent the letter the next morning while Luna slept in her bassinet and David was at work. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute, not because I was uncertain about my decision, but because I understood the finality of it. Once I pressed send, there would be no going back to the way things had been. But the way things had been wasn't worth going back to. I hit send. Within 2 hours, my phone started ringing. I let every call go to voicemail. By evening, I had 17 missed calls from Mom, 12 from Dad, and 6 from Sophia, who had apparently been recruited for damage control from London. I deleted every voicemail without listening to them. The next step was harder but necessary. I called our internet provider and changed our home address to unlisted. I contacted the hospital and put a note on Luna's records that no one except David, Patricia, and Robert were authorized to receive information about her. I blocked my parents and Sophia on all social media platforms. When David came home that evening, he found me sitting at our kitchen table with a notebook, making lists. "What are you working on?" he asked, kissing the top of my head before checking on Luna. "Logistics," I said. "I'm figuring out all the ways they might try to contact us and closing those doors." He sat down beside me and looked at my list. I'd written down everything from our pediatrician's office to Luna's future daycare to our landlord. Anyone who might receive calls from my parents trying to get information or access. "This is really happening," he said quietly. "This is really happening," I confirmed. "Are you okay with it?" David was quiet for a moment, looking at Luna, who was starting to stir in her swing. "I'm more than okay with it. I'm proud of you, but I want to make sure you're prepared for how they're going to react." As if summoned by his words, there was a knock at our door. Then another. Then the doorbell, followed by more knocking. "Mia? Mia, we know you're in there. Your car is outside." Mom's voice came through the door, strained and demanding. "We need to talk about this ridiculous letter. Open the door." David and I looked at each other. Luna was awake now, making soft cooing sounds, blissfully unaware that her grandparents were outside trying to force their way back into our lives. "We're not going to just go away," Dad's voice joined Mom's. "This is our granddaughter we're talking about. You can't keep us from her." I picked up Luna and held her close, breathing in her sweet baby smell. "Yes, I can," I said quietly, though they couldn't hear me through the door. The knocking continued for 20 minutes. I could hear them talking to each other between attempts, their voices getting more frustrated and desperate. "Maybe we should call the police," Mom said loudly, clearly hoping I'd hear. "Tell them our daughter is having some kind of postpartum breakdown and won't let us see our granddaughter." "Don't you dare," I called through the door, my first and only response. "I'm perfectly fine. I'm also perfectly serious about my boundaries. Leave now, or I'll call the police myself." The knocking stopped. I heard car doors slam and an engine start. From our window, I watched my parents drive away, their faces set in identical expressions of outraged disbelief. "They'll be back," David said. "I know. But each time it'll get easier to say no." I was right. They came back 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Once with Sophia, who had flown back from London specifically to help with what she called this family crisis. Once with a woman I didn't recognize. Later I learned she was Helen Weatherby, recruited as some kind of neutral mediator. Once with just Dad, who tried a softer approach, standing outside our door talking about how much he loved me and wanted to make things right. Each time, I didn't answer the door. Each time they eventually left. Each time it became clearer that they weren't trying to understand what they'd done wrong. They were trying to wear down my resistance until I gave in and pretended nothing had happened. But something had happened. Everything had happened. The hardest moment came 3 weeks after I'd sent the letter. I was grocery shopping with Luna, who was sleeping peacefully in her car seat, when I turned down the baby food aisle and nearly collided with Mom's shopping cart. "Mia!" she gasped, her face lighting up with relief and desperation. "Oh, thank God. And Luna, look at her. She's grown so much." She reached toward Luna's car seat, and I stepped back instinctively. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't what? Don't touch my granddaughter? Mia, this has gone on long enough. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Can't we just move past this?" "Move past what? Move past you missing the birth of your granddaughter for a dinner party? Move past you spending 27 years teaching me that I'm always going to be second priority? Move past you trying to buy your way out of accountability with flowers and gifts?" Other shoppers were starting to notice our conversation. Mom glanced around nervously, always conscious of appearances. "Can we please not do this here?" she whispered. "People are staring." "I'm not doing anything. I'm grocery shopping with my daughter. You're the one who approached me." "Because you won't answer our calls," You won't let us visit. You've cut us out completely over one missed event. One missed event. I repeated the phrase, testing how it sounded. Is that really how you see Luna's birth? As one missed event? You know what I mean? I know exactly what you mean. And that's the problem. Luna stirred in her car seat, making soft baby sounds. Mom's face softened immediately. She's beautiful, Mia. She looks just like you did at that age. Please, can I just hold her for a minute? I'm her grandmother. You had your chance to be her grandmother. You chose the Weatherbees instead. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You made a choice. I'm making one too. I started to push my cart past her, but she grabbed my arm. Mia, please. I'm begging you. Don't punish Luna for our mistake. I stopped and looked at her directly. I'm not punishing Luna. I'm protecting her. There's a difference. Protecting her from what? From grandparents who love her? From grandparents who will teach her that love is conditional, that important moments can be missed for social obligations, that she'll always have to compete for attention and affection. We would never. You already did. You missed the most important day of her life before she was even born. What happens when she has a school play, a graduation, a wedding? What social event will be more important than her milestones? Mom's face crumpled. We learned our lesson. We would never miss anything else. You haven't learned anything. You still think this is about one mistake instead of a lifetime pattern. You still think you can fix this with promises instead of understanding what you did wrong. I gently moved her hand from my arm. Luna is going to grow up knowing she's loved unconditionally. She's going to know that the people who love her will show up for her, no matter what. You've proven you're not those people. I walked away, leaving Mom standing in the baby food aisle with tears in her eyes. It should have felt cruel, but it didn't. It felt like protection. It felt like love in action. That afternoon, I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I made appointments with a therapist who specialized in family trauma and boundary setting. If I was going to rebuild my understanding of family and love, I wanted to do it right. I also started a new tradition. Every Friday evening, David and I would sit with Luna and tell her stories about people who had shown up for us. Patricia driving through a snowstorm to bring soup. Robert leaving work early to meet his granddaughter. David's sister Emma canceling her weekend plans to visit. These are the people who love you, I would tell Luna. These are the people you can count on. Luna would look up at me with her bright, trusting eyes, and I knew I was building something different for her. Something better. A family based on presence instead of promises, actions instead of excuses, showing up instead of standing by. My parents kept trying various approaches for 2 more months. Letters, gifts, intermediaries, surprise visits. Each attempt made it clearer that they were focused on getting their way rather than understanding their impact. So I kept my boundaries firm. Each time they pushed, I pushed back with consistency and clarity. Each time they tried to guilt me, I reminded myself that protecting Luna was worth more than preserving their comfort. I was teaching Luna, through my actions, what it looked like to value yourself enough to demand better, what it looked like to choose quality over obligation, what it looked like to build a life around people who actually showed up. It was the most important lesson I could give her, and it was a lesson I was finally learning myself. 2 years have passed since Luna took her first breath without my parents in the room. As I write this, she's napping in her toddler bed, her dark hair spread across her pillow like silk, her little hand clutching the stuffed elephant that Patricia knitted for her first birthday. The afternoon light streaming through her bedroom window illuminates a space filled with love, security, and the absolute certainty that she matters. She has no idea that she has grandparents who have never held her, no idea that there are people who share her DNA but not her life, no idea that her birth was ever treated as anything less than the miracle it was, and she never will, if I have anything to say about it. The silence from my family has become complete now. The last attempt at contact came 6 months ago. A Christmas card addressed to the Miller family with a photo of my parents smiling at some holiday party, the Weatherbees prominently featured beside them. Inside, Mom had written, "Thinking of you during this special season. We hope Luna is healthy and happy. Love always, Grandma Claire and Grandpa Marcus." I threw it away without showing it to David. The people who had earned the titles Grandma and Grandpa in our house were Patricia and Robert, who had been present for every milestone, every fever, every developmental leap that mattered. Last month, Luna took her first real steps. Not the cautious wobbling she'd been doing for weeks, but confident strides across our living room toward David's outstretched arms. Patricia was there, visiting for the weekend, and she cried happy tears as Luna tottered into David's embrace. "Did you see that?" Patricia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "She's really walking." We spent the next hour encouraging Luna to walk back and forth between us, celebrating each successful journey with cheers and applause. Patricia took dozens of photos and videos, sending them immediately to Robert and the rest of David's family. That evening, as I tucked Luna into bed, I realized something profound. This was what grandparent love looked like: present, engaged, invested in the small moments that made up the big picture of a child's life. Not flowers sent after the fact or cards signed with unused titles, but showing up consistently with genuine joy and involvement. Luna's vocabulary is expanding daily now, and her favorite word is gamma, her version of Grandma Patricia. When Patricia calls, Luna squeals with delight and babbles into the phone. When Patricia visits, Luna follows her around the house, wanting to help with cooking, cleaning, and any other activity that involves her beloved grandmother. She has no concept that there are people missing from this picture, no awareness that some families include grandparents who don't show up, who prioritize social events over grandchildren, who send gifts instead of presents. Luna's world is filled with people who choose her every day. Patricia and Robert, who have never missed a birthday or holiday. David's sister Emma, who drives 3 hours every month just to spend a Saturday with her niece. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who teaches Luna Mandarin phrases and brings her homemade dumplings. My colleague, Sarah, who has become like a sister to me and whom Luna calls Auntie Sarah. This is our chosen family. This is what love in action looks like. The therapy I started 2 years ago has been transformational, not just in helping me process the grief of losing the parents I thought I had, but in understanding how to build the family Luna deserves. Dr. Martinez helped me see that cutting contact with toxic family members isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about creating space for healthy relationships to flourish. You can't plant a garden in poisoned soil, she told me once. Sometimes you have to clear the ground completely before you can grow something beautiful. Luna is that something beautiful. She's growing in soil rich with consistent love, reliable presence, and the unwavering message that she is worth showing up for. She will never know what it feels like to wonder if she matters because the evidence of her importance will surround her every day. Last week, I ran into Helen Weatherby at Target. I recognized her immediately, though she seemed smaller somehow, less imposing than I remembered from my parents' social media photos. She approached me cautiously, clearly recognizing Luna from the features that mirror my own childhood photos. "Mia?" she said hesitantly. I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted you to know that your parents miss you terribly. They talk about you and Luna all the time." I looked down at Luna, who was contentedly playing with a toy in the shopping cart, completely oblivious to this awkward encounter. "Mrs. Weatherby," I said politely, "I appreciate your concern, but my parents made their choice 2 years ago when they decided your husband's retirement dinner was more important than their granddaughter's birth. I've made my choice too. But surely you could forgive." "This isn't about forgiveness," I interrupted gently. "This is about protection. Luna deserves grandparents who will show up for her, not grandparents who will teach her that love comes with conditions and social calendars. Helen looked uncomfortable, probably realizing for the first time that she had been part of the event that caused this family rift. The dinner. It was just one night. One night that revealed everything I needed to know about their priorities. Luna will grow up knowing she's someone's first choice, not someone's afterthought. I smiled at her, not unkindly. I hope you have a lovely day, Mrs. Weatherby. As I walked away, I felt the familiar sense of peace that came with protecting my boundaries. No anger, no bitterness, just clarity about what I would and wouldn't accept in my life and Luna's life. That night, as David and I watched Luna play with her blocks on our living room floor, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. Our apartment felt smaller now with all of Luna's toys and clothes and equipment, but it also felt infinitely more full of laughter, of spontaneous dance parties, of bedtime stories and morning cuddles. Do you ever regret it? David asked, as if reading my thoughts. Cutting them off completely? I watched Luna stack blocks with intense concentration, her little tongue poking out in determination. When her tower fell down, she clapped and immediately started building again, undaunted by the temporary setback. Never, I said. Look at her, David. Look how confident she is, how secure. She doesn't doubt for a second that she's loved and valued. She's never had to compete for attention or wonder if she's worth showing up for. She's incredible, David agreed, his voice soft with pride. She's what I never was as a child, completely certain of her worth. That's what we gave her when we chose to protect her from people who would have taught her to settle for less. Luna looked up at us and grinned, babbling something that sounded almost like "I love you" in her own toddler language. David and I both melted, as we did approximately 40 times a day. She's going to grow up knowing that real love shows up, I continued, that the people who truly care about you don't make excuses when you need them. That family is about presence, not promises. As we prepared Luna for bed that night, I thought about all the milestones my parents would never witness. Her first words, her first steps, her first day of school that was coming soon. They would miss her birthday parties, her Christmas mornings, her teenage years, her graduation, her wedding day if she chooses to marry, her own children if she decides to have them. They would miss everything that mattered because they couldn't be bothered to show up for the day that mattered most. But Luna wouldn't miss them, because she would never know they existed. She would grow up surrounded by people who understood that love is a verb, not just a feeling. People who showed up consistently, reliably, joyfully. 2 years ago, I thought my parents' absence had taken something away from Luna. Now, I understand that their absence gave her something infinitely more valuable. A childhood free from conditional love, from competing for attention, from learning to accept less than she deserved. She will grow up fierce and confident and absolutely certain of her worth, because that's what unconditional love creates. She will choose partners and friends and eventually her own family based on their ability to show up for her, because that's the standard we've set. She will never settle for crumbs because she will have grown up at a table where she was always served the full feast. My parents chose a dinner party over their granddaughter's birth. I chose my daughter over parents who didn't choose us. Looking back, it was the easiest decision I ever made, and the best gift I ever gave my child. 5 years have passed since that September night when I called my parents from the hospital, believing they would choose me. Luna is now 7 years old, a bright, confident second grader with pigtails that never stay neat and a laugh that fills every room she enters. Today is her school's annual Grandparents' Day, and I'm watching from the classroom doorway as she proudly introduces Patricia and Robert to her teacher, Mrs. Henderson. "These are my grandparents," Luna announces with the kind of pure joy that only children possess. "Grandma Patricia taught me how to knit, and Grandpa Robert is building me a tree house." Patricia beams as she admires the artwork Luna has displayed. On her desk, a crayon drawing of our family that includes David, me, Luna, and two figures labeled Grandma and Grandpa with crowns on their heads because, as Luna explained, they're the king and queen of being the best. Robert is examining Luna's science project about butterflies with the serious attention of a NASA engineer, asking thoughtful questions that make Luna stand even taller with pride. Other children gather around, drawn to his genuine interest and Patricia's warm laughter. I watch this scene and feel the familiar wave of gratitude that has replaced any lingering grief about my parents' absence. Luna doesn't know she's missing anything because she isn't missing anything. She has grandparents who show up, who celebrate her achievements, who make her feel like the most important person in the world. After the classroom presentations, we all walk to the school cafeteria for the traditional Grandparents' Day lunch. Luna skips between Patricia and Robert, chattering about her upcoming dance recital and how she's learned to ride her bike without training wheels. "You'll come to my recital, right, Grandma?" Luna asks, even though she already knows the answer. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart," Patricia replies, and I can see the truth of that promise in her eyes. As we sit down to eat cafeteria pizza and chocolate milk, I notice Luna studying the other families around us. Some kids have multiple sets of grandparents. Some have just one. Some have none at all. Luna seems content with her reality, secure in the knowledge that the people at her table are completely devoted to her. "Mama," Luna says suddenly, "Madison's grandma can't come to her recital because she has to go to some party. That's silly, right? Parties aren't as important as recitals." My heart stops for a moment, out of the mouths of babes. That is silly. I agree carefully. The people who love you always make your special moments their priority. Luna nods sagely, as if this is simply an obvious truth about how the world works. That's why Grandma and Grandpa are the best. They always come to my important stuff. Robert reaches over and gently tugs one of Luna's pigtails. "That's because your important stuff is our important stuff, kiddo." After lunch, we walk to the parking lot together. Patricia and Robert are heading back to their house, where they're preparing for Luna's sleepover this weekend. A monthly tradition that started when Luna was 3 and has become the highlight of all their calendars. "Thank you," I tell them as Luna runs ahead to examine a caterpillar she's spotted on the sidewalk. "For everything. For being exactly the grandparents she deserves." Patricia hugs me tightly. "Thank you for letting us love her. She's brought such joy to our lives." "We're the lucky ones," Robert adds. "That little girl is pure sunshine." As they drive away, Luna waves enthusiastically from my arms until their car disappears around the corner. Then she looks up at me with those bright, trusting eyes that have never known disappointment from the people who claim to love her. "Mama, can we stop at the park on the way home? I want to practice on the monkey bars before my sleepover." "Of course we can." As Luna runs toward the playground equipment, I pull out my phone and scroll through social media. A habit I've mostly broken, but sometimes curiosity gets the better of me. I find my parents' Facebook page and see they've posted photos from another country club event. They look older now, grayer, but they're still smiling at the camera surrounded by the same social circle that mattered more than their granddaughter's birth. The photos are tagged with location markers from expensive restaurants, charity galas, vacation destinations. Their life looks exactly the same as it did 7 years ago, revolving around appearances, social obligations, and maintaining their status in a community that probably doesn't think about them much between events. I wonder sometimes if they ever think about Luna, if they ever wonder what she looks like now, what her voice sounds like, what makes her laugh, if they ever see other grandparents with their grandchildren and feel the weight of what they chose to miss. But then Luna calls out from the monkey bars, "Mama, look, I can go all the way across now." And I put my phone away. Their loss isn't my burden to carry anymore. "I see you, baby. You're so strong," I call back. and Luna grins with the confidence of a child who has never doubted that the important people in her life are watching and celebrating her victories. That evening, as I tuck Luna into bed, she asks me the question I've been preparing for since she was born. Mama, do I have other grandparents? Like, besides Grandma Patricia and Grandpa Robert? I take a deep breath. We've talked about how families come in all different shapes, how some people have lots of grandparents and some have few, how love is what makes someone family, not just DNA. But this is the first time she's asked directly about my parents. Well, I say carefully, Daddy's parents are your grandparents and they love you so much. Some children also have their mama's parents as grandparents too. Do I? You have me and I had parents just like you do. But sometimes grown-ups make choices that mean they can't be in their grandchildren's lives. Luna considers this with the seriousness she applies to all important information. Did they make bad choices? They made choices that weren't right for our family. But the most important thing is that you have grandparents who love you completely and show up for everything that matters to you. Like Grandma and Grandpa? Exactly like Grandma and Grandpa. Luna seems satisfied with this explanation. I'm glad I have the best grandparents, she says sleepily. Me too, baby. Me too. As I turn off her light and close her door, I realize that I've kept every promise I made to her as a newborn. She knows she's loved unconditionally. She knows she's worth showing up for. She knows that the people who truly love her will choose her again and again, without hesitation or excuse. She will grow up with a healthy understanding of what love looks like in action. She will never accept less than she deserves because she's never been offered less. She will build relationships based on mutual respect and consistent presence, because that's the only model she's ever known. My parents missed more than Luna's birth 7 years ago. They missed the chance to watch a remarkable little girl grow into someone extraordinary. They missed bedtime stories and birthday parties and first steps and first words. They missed the daily miracles of watching a child discover the world. But their loss became Luna's gain. Their absence created space for people who understood that love is a privilege that requires showing up. Their failure to choose us allowed us to choose better. 7 years ago, my parents taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that you teach people how to treat you by what you accept. I stopped accepting less than Luna and I deserved, and in doing so, I created a life filled with people who understand that love is not a noun, it's a verb. Today, watching Luna beam with pride as her chosen grandparents celebrated her accomplishments, I knew with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. Some stories end with reconciliation and forgiveness. This one ends with something better: protection, growth, and the unshakable knowledge that Luna will never have to learn the hard lessons I learned about conditional love. She will grow up knowing that she is someone's first choice, always, and that knowledge will be the foundation for every relationship she builds for the rest of her life. My parents chose a dinner party. I chose my daughter's future. Looking at the life we've built in the wake of that choice, I have no doubt which decision created more love in the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.